Hello, Duhut, bonjour, Olan. You're very welcome into the Study Hub today for episode 7 of our series, where we take you, the Leaving Cert student, gently by the hand and guide you through the subjects week by week. So what do we have for you today? Well, busy show as ever with Maths Higher Paper 2, which gives us an excuse to play a bit of a very, very, very strange song about angles.
Between 0 and 90, an angle is acute. This angle's small and skinny and kinda cute. It looks like a V or the top of a Y, or the angles that you see eating pizza or pie. Angles are measured in degrees, and here's how to remember them with ease.
There you go, a little earworm for you there. You see, we like to inform and entertain here on the Study Hub, as you well know. So while you're singing that to yourselves, we also have economics, and we're going to be talking about how this subject is so vital for so much of our lives. So please listen to this and then please plot a graph.
The rate of inflation continued to ease last month, according to the Central Statistics Office. Consumer prices rose by 3.4% in the year to the end of February, compared to a rate of 4.1% in the year to the end of January.
And Spanish. Katie Lenehan from the Dublin Academy is here, and Katie takes this lark so seriously that she's even set up her own Insta teaching account, and we're all about the Insta on this show. So here we're going to hear about the language, how this is the language of summer holidays for so many of us.
Despacito, quiero respirar tu cuello despacito. Deja que te diga cosas al oído, para que te acuerdes si no estás conmigo. Despacito.
There you go, that's got you singing in the car. We'll find out all about Katie's wonderful social media life there in a few minutes. But first today we're going to start with maths, and we are so pleased that Louise Boylan is back with us from the Institute of Education. Louise, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're still in speaking terms with us if you're here again, thank God.
Of course.
We haven't finished you off yet. But I mean, again, Maths Higher Paper 2. Oh, this is the paper that so many of the students get in touch about. It's one that's just so complex, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a very different paper to paper 1.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot more visual. There's a lot more practical elements to it as well. So it can be a different preference. Some of them prefer it, some of them don't like it.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
How each student reacts kind of so differently.
For sure.
Okay, well, look, let's start as we always do. Just that idea of giving us the format for it, the duration for that paper 2, please.
Sure, yeah. So it's the same as the paper 1. So it's 2.5 hours. It's in just 2 halves, section A, section B, equal weighting. Section A is what we call the short questions. They're 30 marks each, right? They're not particularly short. They're just shorter than the long questions, as I always say. And section B then is what we call the long questions. They're worth 50 marks each.
And duration 2.5 hours. Do people run out of time? Is it one of those?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so they have to be watching the clock really, really closely. For their section A, they have a bit of choice. So there's 6 questions, they have to answer 5. So I would recommend to them spend about 12 minutes on each question. Then that would give them an hour. Then if they go into their section B, they have 4 questions, they have to answer 3. Try to aim for 20 minutes per question, that's another hour. And then if they stick to that, that gives them an extra half hour to play around with, to go back, check their answers, maybe try something that caught them on the first time round.
You'll be thrilled to know that when I look at you, I think drill and skill. I feel that's one of our phrases that you and I have.
Yeah.
And that applies very much to section A. Talk us through the kind of concepts, what's going on there.
Yeah, so for section A is the concepts and skills questions. So this is where, as you say, the more drill and skill kind of questions are.
That's what, go back over those papers.
Go back over the page, go back over the questions, make sure, say for trigonometry, you can find any missing side, any missing angle in any type of triangle, in any sort of shape. Make sure you can find the area of any 2D shape, the region of a shaded area within any 2D shape. Or they're quite routine, those questions. So that is just comes from practice and from understanding. And then for section B, they're much longer questions. They're kind of in a story. They tend to be in a context or a real life question, and they go on for several pages.
And you make the point that they can link things here, like for example, geometry and trigonometry. You're looking for those links all the time.
For sure, yeah.
Don't be surprised to find them leading into each other as well.
Yeah. I mean, they should be looking out for them. They should be expecting them. Probability and statistics as well go very much hand in hand. So you'll often get a question, and it may be a third of its probability, the rest of it is statistics, or vice versa.
Okay, so then we're moving into section C, and we will go back for a minute because I want to talk to you about durations and things. But section C, again, what should people be looking out for here? What are the kind of
for section B.
For section B.
Only the 2, yeah. So for section B, that's the real life questions, yeah. So they just need to kind of
and they kind of dread that.
Down.
They're afraid they'll make a mistake or something, yeah.
And they can be really long questions, and they can also, because we're at the end of the paper, students can tend to be quite tired by the time they get to them. So there's lots of students have different strategies. Some might do one and one, might do one of the short questions, then go do a long question, then come back and do a short question, then come back and do a long question. It's really an individual choice.
Can we talk then about going back to section A and those short questions, right? I mean, they're short. So in terms of answers, what are you looking at there? I mean,
well, the maths is a fill-in on the page. So it's like 2 pages in general for those questions, and they have to fill in on the page. So it's they do kind of force them to keep the answers tight, so they can't go into waffling. They can't give really long answers. They have to kind of get to the point.
And I'm saying 12 minutes. That's your advice about
12
that.
minutes, yeah.
That's very precise.
Yeah, well, at a maximum 15. If they go to 15, they'll run out of time though. So 12, I would be aiming for 12. Yeah.
Now, we love on Study Hub to discuss trends.
Yeah.
Right? Trends is a posh word for what you have coming up.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you see as a trend, Louise?
A trend, yes. I wouldn't use the word prediction, but the trend. Yeah. The paper too tends to be a little bit more... the same kind of stuff comes up a lot, right? As opposed to paper 1. Paper 1's a bit more for free for all. Paper 2, if it's something like probability, they should look out for things like Bernoulli trials. They come up quite often. Expected value comes up quite often. The normal curve is there every year in one way, shape or form. You know, they need to be able to work with their Z scores. They'll understand what I'm saying, right? They need to be able to work their Z scores. So if they're given a value, find the Z score, find the related area, and go backwards. If they're given a related area, find the Z score and work out what value that relates to. So probability, those things come up a lot. For your statistics, confidence intervals, hypothesis testing, pretty much there every year. You know, those things come up a lot.
So it's things like, is the claim justified or not? So
exactly.
And you practice this, practice.
Do as many questions you can find. There'll be loads in your textbooks. There'll be loads in the past papers. And just keep practicing, keep trying. And there's different ones, depends on the information in the question. You use this formula. So they do need to engage with it and understand what formula to use when and why. But that's there pretty much every year.
Okay, so section A, you've got those boxes, you are limited to it, right?
Yeah.
As you said, section B, we're into the long questions here. So they can shoehorn loads of stuff into this. But talk to me about sort of showing the work, that old-fashioned concept. How does that play out?
Well, they just have to show the work. You can't be jumping around. You can't be doing stuff in your head and just writing down the answer.
That'll be an ongoing discussion in my house now about doing the stuff in the head. You know? Please say very clearly that showing the work is important to Louise.
Well, it's literally an instruction on the inside cover of the exam paper is that if all marks are not awarded, relevant work is not shown. That's written on the inside of the exam paper.
And they mean it.
They mean it. But where it comes tricky is in things like probability, because sometimes it's a very quick answer. You know, like if you roll a dice, what's the probability? So there's some like that. But I would encourage them to do something, to write something down, write it in words even first, rather than just throw down an answer, because if they throw down the answer and it's wrong, they get nothing. But if they show that they engaged with the question, you know, if it's something like
really
marbles in a bag, draw the bag, draw the marbles, and then give your answer. Draw, you know, engage with the question. If they can show they've engaged with the question in a meaningful way, that they've read the question, they've understood what the question's asking
and they bring it to life a little
and they've done something, then that could be enough to get them on the ladder. It depends year on year, but if the question was particularly badly answered, then the examiner would probably be happy to give marks for that.
Because that's a really easy thing to build into your work, isn't it?
Yeah,
and that's a strategy that right there that can really help.
Even if they if they're reading a question and it says the mean is this and the standard deviation is this, if they go into the box and they write the symbol for mean, the mean equals 20 and the symbol for standard deviation equals 20, that can get them marks, because they've engaged with the question and they've drawn information out of the question and they understand what those words represent in terms of the symbols.
And the calculator, talk to me about the role of all that.
Well, the calculator is vital, obviously, but then it's important for them to have it on the page first before they go to the calculator, right?
Because that's the temptation, you go straight onto the calculator.
And they do, and then they fumble it because they're panicking, and then they get the wrong answer. So if they write it on the page...
You feel the stress, go on.
I know, but it's so frustrating for them. They're like, I put it in the calculator.
Yeah.
But if they have written it on the page first, so if there's a formula to do with a question, as there is a lot for probability and statistics, write the formula down, then the next line, put the numbers in. Then go to the calculator. Don't go to the calculator until you've written on the page what's going to go into the calculator. Because then if you make a mistake in the calculator, it's only like -1. As opposed to if you just go to the calculator, write down the answer, you got it wrong, that's 0.
I think the stuff is really interesting, that sense of adding value.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
your answer a little bit,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Okay, now the other thing, I mean, the timing of the higher maths papers, it's Friday and then it's Monday. So you've paper 1 on Friday and you've paper 2 on Monday, and it's the early part
Yeah.
of the exams, right? But
Yeah.
you're sort of saying maybe don't let it take over all of your thinking.
Oh,
things
my
are going to
goodness,
pass.
yeah,
But we
like-
know last year, we all know
Yeah.
with paper 1 last year, there was that question, right?
Yeah.
That haunted people for the weekend. I mean, I heard stories anecdotally of people losing the weekend of study.
Oh,
It was
crying.
terrible how people
Yeah.
took it to heart. you know?
Absolutely, right. So this is vital for the students for going into paper 2.
And we discussed
So-
that the other day when you were in with
Yeah,
us.
for sure. Yeah.
Things can happen in the dark corners of a curriculum.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So what they really need to understand is, so paper 1 happens Friday afternoon, paper 2 happens Monday morning. If the paper 1, no matter what happens in paper 1, just put it out of your head and get the head down, trust the process, go into paper 2. If paper 1 was easy, don't start thinking, oh, paper 2 is going to be easy, or don't start thinking paper 2 is going to be hard, right? Or if paper 1 was hard, don't start thinking, oh my God, paper 2 is going to be hard, or paper 2 is going to be... Don't overthink the situation whatsoever, right? Whatever happened in paper 1, that's done. Put it to bed. If it went well, happy days. If it didn't go well, don't worry about it, because if it didn't go well and everybody's upset about it, the examiner will tweak
Yeah.
the marking scheme, as we've spoken about before. I always say to them, if you come out of the exam and everybody's crying,
Yes.
you're laughing. Right, you'll be grand.
Philosophy
Everybody's
for
fine,
life there.
because the examiner will just have to tweak the marking scheme.
Absolutely.
Right, and we know
we've
that.
seen it being very fairly done.
Yeah,
over
and
the
then
last
it is
years.
fairly done, because if there's a question, and to be fair, I've looked at questions, gone, yeah, that's a grand question, and then I give it, and then the students are like, what was that? Right, they kind of panic.
And you were surprised by their reaction to what you thought was a
I
straightforward
was,
question. Okay.
yeah, I
That's because you
was.
know everything on the course. but,
Well, you'd hope so.
Talk to me about students battling with this whole, long decision of dropping down, of making that decision of dropping from higher level. I mean, they've done, a year and a half's work on it?
I know.
Kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What's the advice around that?
It is heartbreaking. There's so many, because those bonus points, they're just the
they're
temptation
magical for
the whole
people,
time.
yeah.
It's a very individual decision, and it is down to, there's a bit of a game here,
Yep.
if it's starting to take from all your other subjects, if you're finding you're spending like 20 hours a week on your maths,
Yes.
and then suddenly you're not ready for your biology test, or
Yeah.
you haven't prepared for your orals or whatever
Yeah.
it is, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And that's the 25 points are not worth it then.
So you can nearly clock up the time and just
Yeah.
go, right, over the last 2 weeks, what's
Yeah.
my average been in higher maths?
Yeah.
Is it all I'm thinking about?
Like I call the bonus, I don't call them bonus points, I call them compensation points. That's what I think they are, because they're almost a compensation for the amount of extra time and energy and effort you have
Okay.
to put into your maths.
So
Yeah.
no rushing here. Everybody has time. Take it easy.
Calm down.
Yeah.
Keep it calm. Whatever happened to paper 1, doesn't matter. It's done. There might be some little things. If there was no trigonometry graphs on paper 1, put those in. They might come up on paper 2, right?
Okay.
They're often on paper 1. If it's not on paper 1, that might be on paper 2. There's a few things, there's a few learning off stuff for paper 2 that
Yes.
I've encouraged them. There's a few proofs. For geometry, there's only 3 proofs. We haven't had one the last 2 years.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right, trend.
Ding, ding,
Not
ding.
predict
Ding,
trend.
ding, ding. Trend, yeah.
Trend.
No, yeah, we don't
So
use
there hasn't been one. So the last time proof was asked for geometry was 2021, and the last time before that was 2018, and last time before that was 2015. So they don't come up every year. They'd come up every few years, perhaps. So pay attention to those.
Yeah,
So
I'd be
there are
learning my
little
proofs right
learning
now,
bits. Yeah,
to be honest,
yeah, I
after
think
that.
so.
Louise, we've got some jokes for you.
Oh, brilliant.
Why did the maths joke look sad?
Oh.
Because it had too many problems.
Hey.
Why are geometry lessons so long?
Go on.
Because the teacher keeps going off on a tangent.
Then good ones.
To be honest, they hire me for the comedy, not for the maths. Louise Boylan, as ever, thank you so much.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful, wonderful advice. Go off and learn your proofs. Thank you so much. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
And now we are joined by Katie Lenehan from the Dublin Academy of Education to talk to us about the Spanish exam. Katie, you're very welcome to the show. We've met on air before, but not in person.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to have you in front of us here. Just quickly, sidebar, you bring all this teaching to social media. You think it's a great way to relate to the students and to get the information out there. Talk to us a little bit about your handles. Where can people find your stuff?
So it all started on Instagram maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and took off a little bit during COVID because I was just going mad listening to my mum screaming on Zoom downstairs through her headphones.
A
She's
woman
gonna
we
kill
love
me
and
for saying
adore.
that.
Yeah, exactly. We love and adore.
And yeah, I think just over COVID and kind of as it picked up a little bit of traction, I just find that Instagram is a great way to I guess, interact with the students, because you could put up a question on your story, like, what are you the most worried about for your oral exams?
Yes.
And you'd get straight from the horse's mouth
Yes.
what they're actually worried about, as opposed to...
Where even a
me
classroom, they
assuming it.
mightn't say it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are your handles? Let's get you some even extra
on
followers.
Instagram, they are mslenslanguages. And then on TikTok, I somehow managed to lock myself out of that handle. So the one on TikTok is mslenslanguages1.
And you are all the time just sharing information, tips, strategies about handling both French and Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have you today to talk about Spanish. And we are saying the oral exams coming down the tracks. We've so much to talk about. But before we discuss the orals, can we talk about the written paper and start like we did with Louise as well? Just give us a sense of the overall structure of the exam for Spanish students, please.
Yeah, for sure. So I suppose there's kind of three main skills that are tested in the written paper. So there's 3 sections. So section A is 70 marks, and that is all reading comprehension. So that is testing you on your ability to understand written Spanish, your ability to find synonyms, to kind of recognise word patterns, that kind of thing. And there's also a small amount of translation in that first comprehension.
Okay.
Also, just a complete word of advice for everyone. If you haven't read a book with your Spanish class this year,
Yep.
you cannot do the first comprehension on the exam. You have to do question 1B of section A.
Okay.
So question 1A is for prescribed literature.
Oh, right. Okay,
And then
that's
question
the book.
1B is journalistic text. So if you haven't read the prescribed literature,
Yeah.
you can't answer that question. So
Okay.
you'll have to go to question
Move
1B.
on. Okay.
And then you have 2 kind of shorter comprehensions, which are probably more reminiscent of junior cycle Spanish, just like the format of them.
Okay.
That section A is 70 marks,
Okay.
and then you move into section B, and the first 50 marks of section B is, again, reading comprehension, same kind of thing. Before I get into the thing that everyone's obsessed
Yeah, we will
with,
drill
which
down
is
into
the
that.
opinion piece.
Keep going with the
Yeah.
overview bit. Yeah.
Just let's park it at that.
Yeah.
That's all comprehensions. That means that your comprehensions total account for 30% of your final grade of Leaving Cert Spanish, which I think a lot of students aren't aware of. After those comprehensions, you then have question 5 of section B, which is the opinion piece. That's another 50 marks, or
Okay.
12.5%. Then we get into section C. So the difference between what you're doing in question 5 of section B, which is your opinion piece allows for a little bit of rote learning, that like you can prepare a lot of like phrases, structural elements, that kind of thing. And then section C is a little bit more of an examiner's way of kind of sussing out what your actual Spanish is like, because
So it's interesting how the paper moves up in a
Yeah.
way and letting you to express
Yeah.
more and more.
So section C is more like translation, maybe putting words into context, being able to recognize conversation styles
Sure.
or a personal style of writing. So it's my favorite part of the exam, which obviously means it's every student's least favorite part. So that's fine.
Okay, look, can we focus on the oral exams just for a minute and what's facing students there? Because, you know, when they go in, you made this point, it's very interesting, the examiner doesn't necessarily know what level you're coming in at. So talk to us a little bit about that. What's ahead of them in that oral exam?
Yeah, so I think that's probably very comforting for students. If
Yeah,
you don't,
that's great to know.
If you don't know this already, your oral exams are common level entry. And what that means is that I don't know if you're doing higher ordinary level when you come into the room.
Okay.
So what that means is, by default, the questions at the beginning kind of have to be accessible for every student.
It's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where they give you
Yeah.
the really
Exactly,
nice warm question
They
to
hold all
calm
the
you
awful
down.
ones for the end.
Yeah. So you're building up with the examiner. The examiner's pushing it as you demonstrate
exactly.
your Spanish.
And I think students have this mentality as of late that they're going to be asked curveball questions, or they're
Yes,
going
they're
to
out
be
to
asked.
catch me out.
Yeah. It's the entire opposite. You start off with 0, and everything you say, like the worst thing that happens is you say something wrong, you get 0, but like you're never deducted marks. There's no negative marking.
Yes.
You know, students' favorite thing to ask is, how many marks do I lose if I say this, or
Yes.
how many marks do I lose if I cry in front of the examiner? Nothing. Do you know what I mean? There's 4 components on your oral exam. So for Spanish, you have your role play. So that's like one separate entity.
Okay.
And then kind of across all modern foreign languages, the things that your examiner was going to be keeping in their mind for the general conversation are skills like communication. That, for a student, as opposed to like looking at like the in-depth marking scheme, communication just means, are you able to understand what I'm asking you? And do I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a conversation?
Okay.
I know you have everything learnt off, but
Yes.
like, can you at least fool me into thinking there's some sort of a conversational element to
Yes.
this? Then we have your grammar, or what's sometimes referred to as structures.
Okay.
And that's not just your verbs. Your verbs are obviously a big part of it. We have things like agreement, so like understanding the gender of nouns, sentence structure, and then we have pronunciation, and your vocabulary as well.
Now, one of the things you mentioned there already, and this, I think you've got great advice around this, is that thing about students are afraid they're going to not understand a question or phrase and go, sorry, and end up screaming. You've lovely advice around this. Talk us through that if suddenly there is a phrase that somebody doesn't understand. I just think this is a great strategy.
So let's say you go in, you're absolutely terrified, and the examiner asks you, I don't know, something along the lines of like, what would you change about the Leaving Cert system?
Right.
And you hear the word Leaving Cert system and you're like, oh my God. As opposed to sitting there in silence and having like a staring competition with the examiner, being like, please help. Ask the examiner for help. Tell me that you don't understand
In
what I'm...
Spanish. You're
Yeah,
saying
obviously,
anticipate this.
yeah.
No, but you're saying, I think this is really serious. Be prepared for the fact that you
Yeah.
mightn't understand something.
Yeah.
So you're not going to panic. You now know,
Yeah.
I am going to say,
Yeah.
please, can you
Yeah.
help me? Could you repeat that?
Yeah.
I think that's really clever.
Yeah, can you repeat that question? Can you ask me that question in a different way?
Lovely.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Or even if it's a case where like they ask you about something that you really haven't prepared, or like a really kind of abstract question.
Yeah.
As opposed to just sitting
Random.
there saying, I don't know. Just say, God, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that. But I tell you what does worry me
Yes.
is this, you know, that like you're,
Steer
again, trying to still communicate with me. I'm not expecting you to know everything about current affairs
Sure.
or the environment, whatever. I'm just basing my marks on your ability to communicate with me.
No, I think that's such a
Yeah.
clever thing. Can we move on to the written paper and let's talk about this opinion piece? Because
Yeah.
again, you make the point the comprehensions are worth so many marks, yet all they talk about are the opinion
Yeah.
pieces. Talk us through how can I handle an opinion piece and getting that preparation done?
Okay, so the opinion piece, there are so many different ways of approaching it. I think different things are going to work for different students.
Okay.
I think probably the best thing that I could say that's quite universal is have things like a solid introduction and a solid conclusion learnt off. So kind of similar to what you were saying about maths, go
Yes.
in and show me that you can engage with the question. Okay? That like you can put something on the piece of paper to kind of start off.
Yes.
Okay. At the end of each of your points, can you make some sort of connection back to the question? Can you give me one of the buzzwords from the question to nearly make me feel as though what you're talking about
So keep using the
is more
question that's
relevant?
written in front of you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're kind of trying to like fool the examiner into thinking that the content you're writing is maybe a little bit more relevant than it might actually be.
And also, it doesn't matter what your opinion is in real life. This
Oh,
will
yeah.
never be held against you.
No, never.
Have the opinion that works best for your vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and that's something a lot of students don't do.
No, I think they get caught up in something. Yeah.
Like read the question and then say to yourself, what does my opinion mean? Okay, and then even if it's a case that on the exam you have to say agree equals positives of social media,
Yeah.
disagree equals negatives of social
Yeah.
media. Figure out what your opinion would mean and then look at that list and say which one of these is the easiest opinion for me to talk about in Spanish.
Give me your
you
3
know.
R's.
Your?
Your 3 R's.
Oh, sorry, I think you said 3 hours. My 3 R's for the conclusion. Okay, repeat, recall, recommend. Repeat your opinion.
Okay.
So as I've already said, I agree or I disagree, whatever.
Yeah.
Recall your points. So after having spoken about
The
whatever and
positive
whatever,
social media, climate, whatever.
it's clear that this is a controversial topic, whatever, and then recommend something. So if I could, I would like to.
I would like to see
Yeah.
this happen or
Just
X
for
will happen.
your examiner to see different varieties in your tenses. So maybe imperfect, subjunctive, conditional towards the end of your answer as well.
You also have a lovely idea about the comprehensions. You were saying get a family member to just shout a random year at you.
Yeah.
And then you have to go and answer the questions for that year.
Yeah,
And that kind
exactly.
of applies to all the subjects, actually.
Yeah,
you
or
know.
even your friend, or even like
2007, off you
yeah,
go.
even just like ask, I don't know, like a random year generator, something online. Just pick a year at random and just say, okay, I'm not going to use anything.
Yes.
I'm just going to look at this like an exam and just give it a go, see what happens, look at the marking scheme, and then take your problem areas away from that, because that's what you're going to have to do in the exam. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to have anything else. You're not going to have your friend or your phone or your book or whatever. And I think at this stage of the year, that's what you need to be worried about, is maybe not just constantly learning new stuff, but also
And
exam
also,
technique.
and this for all exams, stay away from the negative people.
Yes.
There's
Oh
always
my
this thing
God,
that starts,
please.
oh, the exam is really mean in
Yeah,
the oral.
yeah,
The
yeah.
oral exams in particular.
Yeah.
Stay away is your advice.
Yeah, don't go in at a stupid hour. Like if your exam is at 2:00, don't be in at 9:00 in the morning because you're convinced that you're going to study. All that's going to happen is you're going to watch this queue of people coming out of the oral exams and talk about what awful question they got asked, or what the examiner looks like, or if they're
Just
nice or they're not
distraction.
nice. And it's just going to build you up before the exam, and you're going to be way more nervous. Stay away from all the secret studiers, all the negative Nancy's.
Yeah, they're the people who
you
claim
know.
that they do nothing, and then it turns out later they haven't actually spent
Secret
a year.
studiers are real, okay?
Secret
It's
studies
an
are
epidemic.
a thing. It's
Yeah,
an epidemic.
for sure.
Okay, final thoughts. If I'm in the home and I'm going,
Again, same kind of idea. Try to stay calm. I think at this stage of the year, focus on what you do know. Stop worrying about all the stuff that is
Great
holding you back.
line, yes.
Try and build up your strengths. If you have a little bit of time, maybe look at your problem areas and try and build them up somewhat as well. Try and immerse yourself, especially this week before the orals. Try and immerse yourself in as much Spanish as you can. Podcasts like the Duolingo podcast, Coffee Break Spanish, websites like Fluent U and Memrise are all brilliant resources if you're just trying to up the game a little bit. And then before the actual exam, I think the biggest piece of advice I can give any student in their exam is show what you know. If you've
show it off.
Yeah, if you've never
This is your
gotten
moment.
If you've never gotten a particular tense right,
yes.
why are you freestyling that in the exam? Okay, use the stuff that you know you're going to get right. I can always give you marks for getting stuff right. There's no attempt marks for grammar. I'm never going to look at your paper with like one eye open and think it nearly looks right and give you the marks for it. So show me what you know, proofread everything, and make sure that you know exactly how much everything is worth.
And the great thing about you, Katie, is that it's an excuse to look at my phone because you're on TikTok. So, hey,
Exactly.
I could be studying, Mom.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Gracias,
Nada.
Katie Lenehan from the Dublin Academy. And if people want to get more information from you, they can check out your videos and your TikTok at mslenslanguages 1. Well, we thought this guy was so good when he was into my business studies a few weeks ago. We dragged him back in again to escort us through the economics paper. It's the lovely Gavin Duffy. Gavin, you're very welcome from
again,
Gavin
thanks.
Duffy Business and the Dublin Academy of Education. Now, economics, I know it's a change paper. How old is this new course?
So 21 was the first version
Okay.
of it, yeah.
So new things are coming up all the time, right?
Yeah.
But the layout, the exam, 2 sections, those things haven't changed. Talk us through the sort of the timing and the layout that people can expect with this paper.
So for economics, because it's a new course, students have 20% done. So the overall exam is taken out of 500 marks. So
Do they ever find out before? No, they won't know until after what they got.
They won't
okay.
know, yeah. So, but I think there's a much clearer idea because it's we're a couple of years in of what's expected. So
Yes.
I'd say the average grade will be up this year, and I'd say most would be in the kind of mid-teens out of 20. So it's a great kind of starting point for them.
Great, that's fabulous. And we're going by the last 2 years, that's safe thing to say. which is
Exactly,
great.
yeah, I'd say so, yeah. And then in the exam itself, then the shorts are worth 100 as well, so they work out the same as your project, like that. And the long questions are worth 300, so it's 500 overall. The written paper is worth 400 of it.
Okay, and 2 sections, shorts and longs, a bit like what we were talking about in maths as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And similar to what Louise was saying, the shorts are just mini versions of longs. It's not like it's a mad sudden like multiple choice. They're very, very different. It's
Yes.
a short question looks similar to what could get asked in an A or a B in a long. But they've good choice. So within the shorts, they have to do 8 out of 10.
Okay.
And within 3 of them as well, there's like an internal choice. So there's an A, and then they can do a B or a C with it. So it's a nice kind of spread. And
That is a nice spread, yeah, that's
and they
kind
could answer both as well. So if they were confident with the A, they could have a go at B or C, and they might pick up marks either way. So
We love that.
yeah. So the shorts are very good. Like they might get a question like to agree or disagree with something, and then justify it in the shorts. Or they kind of mix in a few graphs, and so it's a wide kind of range of questions that the student gets asked there.
Now, you were talking about the fact they're bouncing into the exam with a few marks in the bag, which is always nice. But what for you do you think separates students that score those higher grades?
Yeah, well, I suppose a lot of students would read the question, think of something good to say, and they're usually very good at finding solutions to problems, and they get that down on the paper really, really well. And then what they don't really do very well is explain why it's a solution. So I think like the biggest
done the
thing,
work, like, they have the answer,
they've done
it's
the
a
work,
killer.
they get it, and they're
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
just sitting there going, yes, I got it.
Yeah.
So like on the mocks there was a question about how to improve income inequality.
Okay.
So loads of them are great at like increase minimum wage, and they pick up half the marks for saying that. So it's like the examiner in the correcting conferences, they always say like action plus result. So say
Action
what you
plus
have to
result.
do.
I love that,
And
yes.
say what it'll do.
So
And,
what would you add to that, for
So
example?
so then a lot of them would explain like this improves standard of living, or like they get paid, like it's an increase in what they're allowed to get paid. But
Yes.
you need to reference the fact that it's going to bring lower income earners up closer to the middle or higher income earners, or it's closing the gap between lower earners and higher earners.
So it's that adding value bit.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
give us, you know it, just write it down.
Yeah, and they are, because the understanding is there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff is quite similar, like it's all linked together.
Yes.
And especially this time of year, I think in sixth year sometimes students have a tough time with economics. They love the fifth year stuff, and in sixth year it tends to get into areas that they mightn't enjoy as much, and the project brings it down. But I just say
Fifth
like,
year's great, you see.
Yeah.
Fifth year's the adventure.
exactly, and I just say to them like, hold on in there, because economics, I think, is kind of like a late arriver for a lot of them, that suddenly everything starts making sense, and there's a good bit of time between now and summer for them for that kind of penny to drop, and as they start revising lots of the other stuff, they'll really build confidence kind of going towards June as well.
Now tell me about Teletubbies. Why are we talking about Teletubbies?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to come up with some way of getting them to remember graphs. They like in economics, you draw loads of graphs,
Okay.
and a big problem is, again, they're good at drawing the line in the right place, and then they just forget to pick up all the extra marks that count. So
They're there to be taken,
exactly,
right? So
yeah.
talk us through it, yeah.
So I just start drawing a really bad Lala Teletubby on the board, and it's supposed to stand for God, now I'm forgetting it. It's supposed to stand for labels and arrows on lines and axes.
Okay.
So LALA. So essentially label every single line that you draw, and then make sure you label the X and Y axes as well, and that it's the right thing, and then show any directional changes. So in economics, you have to show like if demand goes right
Yes.
or left or out or in. If you leave out the arrow, you're going to leave out the mark. So you just want to make sure you're constantly showing where stuff is moving to. So I just say LALA over and over when we're drawing graphs.
You're the parent of a young child by any chance.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Moving on as well, the new course, they like to keep it modern. Recently they mentioned the Rugby World Cup, the deposit return scheme on the 2023 paper. What do we think? Again, we're not asking for predictions, but potentially, ding, ding, ding. What could we maybe be thinking about for 2024?
Yeah, you see that definitely. Yeah, I was trying to come up with things that are in the news, around the time when the papers are being put together.
Yeah, there's
and
images of the examiner at home going, oh,
exactly.
yes, that's topical.
Yeah. Definitely, they have a little
What
note on
month
their
is it when
phone,
they're
and they're just
writing
adding
it?
it.
Yeah.
So I think like dodgy boxes was something that was referenced. That
phrase just
I
makes
don't
me
know.
laugh. Yeah, dodgy boxes.
And yeah, I'd say it would be something that kids could relate to.
And what would be a question around that?
Yeah, so they could link it like the hidden economy is all the transactions that aren't recorded on national income statistics. So they could tie it in with that. And what they're huge on in the new course is how the government can intervene or what they can do to fix it. So they might ask what are two methods of
that was a talking point,
reducing dodgy box usage, or
So circular economy, hidden economy, these
Exactly,
are all
yeah.
kind of areas. Okay. Now we've seen big hikes in prices recently. Are there any other recent changes in the economy that students should know? Like we hear a lot about inflation, obviously, other interest rates, or how would they frame a question like that?
Yeah, I suppose again, to keep it modern, they would definitely be. I would imagine that's very much on the radar of the examiner. Like with inflation, it's kind of on the way down. So I would say, rather than them saying the impact of high inflation, which would have been more kind of within last year's kind of zone, it might be of decreasing inflation and impacts on the economy.
Okay.
So like what would be the impact on that? For interest rates, then the ECB have kind of paused interest rates, and they might ask a student to agree or disagree with pausing the interest rate hike.
What's the right answer there?
You could argue both. So like they have paused it they have increased interest rates to try and control inflation, to reduce people's spending by making it more expensive to borrow. And so you could agree with pausing because they don't want the economy to go into recession or shrink too much, and inflation is coming under control. Mm-hmm. Or you could disagree by saying inflation isn't quite there yet, so they could continue it to make sure it gets below at or below 2%.
Yeah, personally, I'm into pausing that.
Yeah.
That's bringing my own baggage to the paper. Any other predictions, trends you think students should be aware of as they get ready for June?
I suppose what we're saying, it's a new course, so what hasn't come up yet would be one thing that I would try and keep an eye on. Like there's a list of the
Go on. Yes,
there's a good list of the learning outcomes, and if you go through them, you can spot stuff that hasn't really been asked. Like there was a sample paper in 2019, and the Gini coefficient was on it, which is around income inequality. So definitely go on and look at that question. The fair trade movement hasn't been asked yet, so looking at the benefits.
Lurking, ready for a moment in the
exactly,
spotlight. Okay.
ready to come out. But then the other thing
They're
that's
great topics.
yeah, great topics.
Aren't they?
Yeah,
It's great paper. Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah, and kids, the students tend to really enjoy it when they get into
Yeah.
it. And a lot
They've
of it
made
is
a real
relatable.
effort with this new course, and that's what I'm saying. As the different courses are changing, they're really trying to communicate with that age group, I think.
And kind of freshen up to things that they're into, like sustainability. Like you'd see the kind of younger generations are so much more more aware, I think, of a lot of social sustainability. Fast fashion was something that was on the paper, and income elasticity of demand was another one that hasn't been asked yet.
Ding, ding,
Consumer
ding,
surplus
ding, ding.
linked into market equilibrium. They would be things that I would definitely go and look and cover. It can be quite useful to look back at some of the past paper questions from before the course change. There's still a good bit of
because
I'd say
the
about
core
half
principles are there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of relevant stuff. Like it mightn't appear in the exact same way, but
Yes.
if you've kind of run out of questions to do because there's only a certain amount of papers, it's generally no harm. You could ask your teacher and check which bits are still relevant, but generally it's a good place to go fishing for extra questions.
I'm just going to throw you one curveball, right? In
Yeah.
terms of students picking economics, there's a kind of a myth that you should be a Louise Boylan higher level maths, really able for that to handle economics. What's your pitch in terms of people considering economics? So I get asked all the time because I present Study Hub what people should pick for their Leaving Cert. A little bit stressful.
It's definitely become more accessible, and definitely the
This new
project
course,
helps
you're
a lot.
enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, like what we lost from the old course, we used to get loads of choice, but I think the examiners probably didn't like that because people would just rip out half of the course and nearly teach only a certain half. But
Yeah.
so there's more in it, but it's smaller. So you tend to get it covered like faster than some of the heavier content courses. Like business would have a lot more content in it.
Yes.
So it is there. I'd say if you were picking it in fifth year, within a few months you'd find out pretty quickly. So I would say if you wanted to do it, don't if it wasn't working out very well after 3 months, I would look to shift subjects if it's possible in your school.
Like
Like
kicking in fifth year, sixth year ain't going to be a walk in the park.
Yeah.
I get it. Gavin Duffy, thank you so much. Gavin, you're online as well. Where we can find you?
Well, it's mainly I just have a website where I just share resource and stuff. It's gavinduffybusiness.com. So I've Twitter and stuff, but haven't moved over to the dark side of TikTok and things.
Maybe
yet.
next year. Well, look, that's our lot. Sorry, Gavin, thank you so much for
Thanks
joining
so
us.
much,
But that is our lot for this week. You can join us next week for, believe it or not, Grab Your Tissues, the final episode in this series for 2024 for Study Hub. And as ever, please check out all our extra resources and tips and hints on RTE Learn. Our TikTok videos, they are there on the RT Radio 1 account. And physics, for example, has gone gangbusters from last week. Kieran Mills is now a viral social media star. Over 73,000 views already for him. He's in shock. We're not, though. But please check out all our feeds there on social media streams as well. So many of our teachers are on social media as well. But for now, that's our lot. So slán go bóil.